Welcome, one and all. Thank you all for tuning in. What a pleasure to have you. It's an absolute joy, and I am delighted to welcome you all to the second live show of Puro Sabor Virtual 2021. I hope you all had a fabulous 2 weeks since we kickstarted the virtual edition of Puro Sabor. And with our second edition, we're going to be talking about a highly interesting and super important aspect of the industry, and that is the value and the economic importance of the industry in Nicaragua in general. And we have a very special guest here with us today, as always. And it is my pleasure to welcome Juan Ignacio Martínez from Joya de Nicaragua. And with him, our dear friend and hosts, right from the Lead Masters in Dubai. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm delighted to have you.
A pleasure, as always. It's so good to see everyone there. It's so good to be with Juan Martinez. It's so good to be with you, Reinhard, and all our friends. And may I say that that's a very good looking haircut.
Fresh off the barber. You know, not easy those days, but thanks for the flowers. Juan, welcome. And thanks for tuning in to our second show of Puro Sabor. A pleasure to have you.
Reinhard, right? How are you guys? Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you guys are. I'm actually shocked to see so many great faces and friends tonight. So hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Roy, Indiana, Charlie, Johan, everybody there. It's awesome to see your faces. Ray, it's great. Thank you for having me.
And Juan, you're not even seeing all the people who are watching us on YouTube live. So to all of you, welcome as well. If you have any questions, please make sure to put those questions underneath the live stream over on YouTube. We will forward all your questions to Juan or to Rod, or maybe I can answer some of them myself. But it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for logging in via that live stream as well. We will just share some of the information in the live stream over on Facebook as well, so people can definitely tune in and follow all the action. To set the stage for today's episode and to get you in the mood and show a little bit of the flair, show a little bit of the feeling, the lifestyle, and what working in the cigar industry in Nicaragua truly means, we have prepared a little video clip for you. And we want to take you right to Nicaragua. We want to bring Nicaragua to your living rooms, to your doorstep, and make you experience the nature, the essence, the terroir, and most importantly, the people of Nicaragua. And so without further ado, let me play a little video for you of a wonderful lady that has been with Joya de Nicaragua for many, many years. Here is the story of Panchita.
Yo me siento familia de los que trabajamos aquí en Joya de Nicaragua, principalmente por los años que tengo de trabajar aquí, tanta gente que ha pasado por esta empresa. Y entonces nosotros compartimos nuestras experiencias, compartimos cumpleaños, compartimos todo. Todos los domingos en mi casa sí nos reunimos familiar, con mi familia, mis hermanos. Inclusive hasta aquí de la fábrica llegan los chavalos a visitarnos. Y yo paso feliz porque estoy con todos ellos. Éramos muy pobres nosotros y mi padre era jornalero, trabajaba diario, ganaba poco. Mi hermana me dijo, para que no sigamos en esta pobreza te voy a llevar a trabajar. Yo entré a trabajar el 19 de febrero de 1968. Me llevaron al empaque. Después fui superando y ya me pusieron como a hacer nombres en una maquinita. Nosotros allá trabajábamos más mujeres que varones. y siempre así ha sido, pues trabajamos más mujeres que varones. Ahorita en este momento sí ha crecido bastante la empresa a favor de todos nosotros los trabajadores, no solo de las mujeres, de todos, de los varones también. Si a mí me llamaran de nuevo a trabajar, yo vengo a Joya de Nicaragua a trabajar de nuevo, porque ha sido toda mi vida, mi familia. Trabajamos juntos, compartimos juntos, y ese es el gran legado que yo le dejo a todos los trabajadores de Joya de Nicaragua. La calidad no es nuestro deber, es nuestro compromiso. Yo soy Panchita, yo soy Joya de Nicaragua con mucho orgullo.
It's moving images and pictures that touch the heart. And hopefully they will give all of us and all our viewers a little glimpse into the heart and soul of the people behind the wonderful cigars that we get to enjoy on a daily basis. Juan, what does it mean to you to see those images? And in particular, since Panchita has been with you for so many years at Joya de Nicaragua, but she truly resembles all the people in Nicaragua that work in the premium cigar industry. What does that mean to you personally? And how do you feel when you look at that video, read those lines and listen to those words of Panchita?
Thank you for starting the conversation with that video, with that testimony of Panchita's life, because in a way, for everybody in the cigar industry here in Nicaragua, everything starts with the people. This is a very humane activity, a humane product. It's made by people to be enjoyed by people. So to start with that phase, the face of the families, of the workers, of their dedication, but also their struggles is quite profound. And I have to say that every single time I have a conversation with Panchita and with a lot of other, we call them legacy leaders from our company that have been with us for more than 50 years now, it touches you, because we would not be anywhere where we are today, near where we are today, if it wasn't because of them. Their lessons, their teachings, their the challenges that they have faced for all the time. So that story of Panchita replicates inside each of our companies in Nicaragua. It replicates inside each of our families in Nicaragua, those companies that are run and operated by families. And you will find that humanity ever present here in Nicaragua. And I think that one of the things that, especially when you come to Nicaragua, and I know those of you who have come to Nicaragua can testify to that, one of the important aspects of our trade is that once you go beyond the product itself, that it's raw tobacco, rolled tobacco leaves into tubes that can be made anywhere in the world, but when you actually set foot in Nicaragua and you start meeting the people and you start gazing into their eyes and listening to their jokes and to their laughter, that's when the numbers, those big numbers that we're going to talk about later, become something meaningful. And anyway, everybody here in this conversation, but also everybody tuning in, everybody that has purchased a cigar from Nicaragua, a cigar from Honduras, a cigar from Mexico, a cigar from Cuba, a cigar from the Dominican Republic, has a responsibility and a role to play in that, because through the trust that you give us cigar makers by acquiring our products, then you impact the lives of so many thousands of people. And to answer your question, it melts my heart, because that is one of the main reasons I continue to be in this industry. And that was the main reason why I got into the industry following on my father's footsteps, to be able to see palpable impact on the lives of so many thousands of people in Nicaragua. It's not only powerful, it's also profound.
That's amazing. I mean, you cannot help but to think about the success that Nicaragua has achieved. It speaks for itself. The quality of the product, the cigars that are coming out, and the people that are rolling those with a lot of positive energy and happiness. And I don't want this question to be perceived negative in any way, shape, or form. On the contrary, because I love Nicaragua and what it stands for, but how do we, and I say we because I consider myself one of them, or one of the Nicaraguans as a society and as people and as producers, how do we protect the competitive edge of Nicaragua versus other countries? What I'm trying to say, what are we doing today to make sure that this amazing journey continues in the future?
Well, you've actually asked a very, very important question, and it's a difficult one because there are many implications to that, and there is no one answer, because the reason of why we are where we are, it doesn't account for one single reason or one single factor. It's a conglomerate of different variables and factors and energy from different sectors that has allowed us to reach where we are today. So in order to maintain that, we will have to capitalize all of those energies and all of those factors from all over the country, but also from outside the country, to allow us to maintain that competitiveness. But before we get into that, right, because I love the question, I would like everybody to understand where we are and where we come from, in order to understand how we're going to be able to sustain. And I invite anybody to pitch in and collaborate, because you said how do we maintain that? And that's a key question for everybody here involved. So Ryan, can I share a screen very briefly and sort of set up the background of the importance of the Nicaraguan cigar and tobacco industry?
With pleasure, Juan. Please go.
Can I see it? Okay.
Excellent.
So the first step where we begin is to recognize that Nicaragua has become the #1 cigar producing country in the world. And this is not up for debate. I'm not trying to bring, open a debate for anybody. This is given by the raw data, the raw numbers that we see year in and year out. Just to give you an idea, the most important cigar market in the world is by far the United States. There are some estimates that somewhere between 50% to 60% of cigars that are smoked worldwide are smoked in the United States. So just last year, in 2020, the country imported 361 million cigars, million large sticks that they are defined. And this is, by the way, you can find this in Cigar Aficionado and CAA and many other parts. And these are official numbers. And this is only for cigars imported in the United States. And you see three main graphs there, three main rectangles. This is the total, 361. Half of those are coming from Nicaragua, meaning that 5 out of 10 cigars, or 1 out of 2 cigars that are smoked in the United States, are coming from Nicaragua. For such a diverse industry, that's quite powerful when you think that Nicaragua alone accounts for the combined numbers of the Dominican and Honduras together for last year. The Dominican imported 102 million cigars, Honduras 71.2, and Nicaragua exported to the United States 186.2 million cigars. By extension, if the United States is the world's largest market, then the biggest player in the United States would be also the biggest player in the world stage. So it's quite important to see that even though the Dominican, Honduras, and in some other countries are great cigar makers, Nicaragua is by far the king in terms of production. But that wasn't the same every time. If you see the numbers, again, from CAA official statistics of imports into the United States from Nicaragua, in 2000, 20 years ago, we registered 19 million cigars. In 2010, 10 years later, we grew to 86 million. And by 2020, we grew 100 million cigars to 186 million sticks. So, and if you go further back into 1995, we were exporting somewhere between 12 and 13. Even with the boom era, Nicaragua was still a newcomer. And when you see the track record between Nicaragua, Honduras, and Dominican, you see how Nicaragua picks up sustainably growing up. And that's powerful. Now, the second aspect of the importance of Nicaraguan cigars and tobacco is because both products are very, very important for the Nicaraguan economy. Last year, 2020, was a record year for our industry. We exported roughly $291 million in tobacco and cigars and all related products around cigars and tobacco. And in Nicaragua, we have 5 main products of export: coffee, gold, beef, car harnesses, which is basically the electrical wiring for cars, and textiles. And then we have tobacco and cigars. What is the main difference between all of these items? You can see the 5 pictures there. Most of them, including coffee, gold, and beef, would be considered a commodity, meaning that none of those items really are relevant where they come from. Of course, you can go to Starbucks on a good season and you'll find a micro lot of coffee coming from Matagalpa in Nicaragua, something very special. But in general, 95% of the coffee traded in the world doesn't really matter if it's Nicaraguan, Brazilian, from Vietnam or whatever. The same happened with gold. When you buy a gold coin, you're not looking for a stamp that says made in Nicaragua or extracted from Nicaraguan soil. In beef, the same happens. When you go to the supermarket or to a restaurant, you're not necessarily looking for the beef that's coming from a particular place in Central American region. Car harnesses, well, you don't even know where they come from. You don't even care because those are the wires that go into the your cars. And textiles. Sometimes you go in the sticker of your shirt or your trousers and you say, you know, where is this made from? You know, this is Indonesia, Nicaragua, but it doesn't really matter. Your decision to purchase all of these products are not really influenced by where they come from. And then we have cigars. And this is a game changer because there is no single product made in our country that is exported under the brand made in Nicaragua. In fact, when you turn over every single box of Nicaraguan made cigars, it says handmade in Nicaragua. And that is important because we're not exporting just raw materials. We're not exporting commodities. We're not exporting just a leaf. We are exporting a brand that is identified by consumers. And if I ask everybody here to raise your hands, except Ricardo Carioni, of course, which is not fair to ask him, but if you raise your hands, how many of you would know of Nicaragua, about Nicaragua's culture, heritage to the level that you do today, if it wasn't because of Nicaraguan made cigars? I would expect that a great majority of you might have heard of Nicaragua, might have visited Nicaragua for tourism, but none of you would know as much as you do or know as many Nicaraguans as you do, of course, because of Nicaraguan cigars. So when you think about it, it's powerful. It's powerful. And all of this comes to Esteli. We call it the cigar epicenter of the world. And what does it mean that cigars are such an important product for Nicaragua? Well, again, Nicaragua is the #1 exporter of premium cigars worldwide. We are exporting currently in 2020. We exported at least a box of cigars to 96 countries around the world, which is a great number. If you think about it, you can smoke a Nicaraguan cigar almost in every single country in the world. Not talking about those where cigar smokers take the cigar, but cigars are actually imported into 96 countries. Many more because some companies have their distribution centers outside of Nicaragua, so we don't really know if those cigars go to other countries. But 96 countries receive official imports of Nicaraguan cigars. 80% of those of cigars exported from Nicaragua, yes, they are going to the United States. And our exports accounted to $200 million of high value added product. Remember, we transformed this beautiful leaf into a final roll product. So you take into account labor, you take into account processing, you take into account packaging. All of that is value added, which is fantastic. And most importantly, more than 40,000 people are employed in our industry, directly, indirectly, and permanently. When you multiply 40,000 direct employees by the number of members of an average household in Nicaragua, which would be somewhere between 5.1 and 5.3, we're talking about more than 200. Okay, so just to wrap it up, and when we talk about the industry, you don't think about just cigar making individually as an individual thing. You have to think about it as a cluster. Like I try to joke a lot of it, and I probably said it in the show before, but Esteli, northern Nicaragua, is like the Silicon Valley for tobacco, except with much less money, of course. Or Napa Valley wine country in the United States. Because there's so many things happening around cigar making, and more than 100 companies are directly in tobaccos, from cigar makers, box makers, band makers, etc. So think about this. We grow tobacco, of course, in the fields. We have our tobaccos. That's one part of the industry. The second stage is the pre-industry, or the fermentation, the processing of the leaves, selection, and everything. Then we have cigar making per se, of cigar making, cigar rolling, packaging, exporting, everything, you know. Then we have world-class band printers or specialized printers of packaging materials. We have world-class box makers. We have hundreds of box makers that supply the box, some of them wooden, some of them carton, some of them different shapes and forms of boxes for our products. We have microfinance people who develop because of our trade, and they can come and finance our businesses and our products. We have, of course, all of the related businesses, from commerce, from food, hostelry, food services, tourism, bars, hotels, and a lot of other small industries that are that move around our industry. It's an impressive thing when you go to Esteli, when you go to northern Nicaragua, and you visualize the impact of one particular activity in the livelihood of so many people around the country. And of course, Esteli continues to be a relatively small city, nondescript for many standards. It's not a world-class tourist destination or anything. It's an industry that is a city that is focused on doing what it does and doing it great. And there are two things that I would like to also point out regarding our industry and the impact on the life of so many people. One is that, as Panchita said, even today, 6 out of 10 workers in our industry are women. When you think about that, considering many other industries around the world, to have 6 out of 10 women, most of them heads of household, many of them single, many of them widow, or many of them just single parents, it's an incredible thing to provide women, and especially young women and men. And that's, I think, one of the things that we're going to be discussing later about the impact on demographics of our industry. So overall, and I'll wrap it up here so we can make it an interaction. So just to set the tone, Nicaragua has become, and I'm not talking about awards or recognitions or rating. That's for another conversation. I'm just giving you the numbers of volumes of impact. Of course, they are related. We wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't because of the quality of what we do. They are very, very closely related. But in any case, the impact is real. It is there. And now we can open up the conversation on how do we maintain that, when, especially now that we've had an unexpected, just to wrap it up, when we talk about who's there in Esteli, and just this is just a sample of the world-class companies that are based in Esteli. We have more than 60 cigar factories, many of them large, many of them medium-sized, and many of them smaller companies that we don't even have a picture of their facade, but that they do work hard in creating and crafting their products. And of course, to wrap it up, humanity, every single worker, every single part of the process has to do with the people, with a person involved in the cigar making. Just to land a little bit in context, because this is a beautiful shot of a normal context. This is today, giving COVID restrictions with, distancing everybody apart, and just a remembrance, a reminder that cigar making is still risky, because we are asking our people to go there every day, wear their masks in the context that they would take, public transport, or walk to their factories, or take their bikes and their motorcycles, and to come in and continue doing what they do best every single day. So a little bit of the context of what happens in Esteli, the commerce that and of course our beautiful cathedral in the center of town that is also very emblematic of our city. So that's it, what I have in terms of putting the context or where we are as an industry. And of course, it wouldn't be fair for me not to thank every single one of you, from our importers, distributors, to brand ambassadors, to, of course, our media, Reinhold Whitmire, that has been with us, with Nicaragua since very, very early on, even before they were called Cigar Journal, they were called European Cigar Journal. I remember still those old magazines. And every single one of you has had a role in achieving what we have achieved as a country and as an industry. So thank you very much, of course, to all of you.
It's an absolute pleasure. I can tell you this much on behalf of myself, on behalf of everybody on this call, and a lot of people that could not make it, unfortunately. It's a very fascinating ecosystem, and being a person that comes from a financial background, numbers do speak, and they speak loud. And you know, it's no secret that Nicaragua has perfected the formula of balancing quality with value, with supply in the market. And in many other countries, this has actually been the absolute challenge. How do you see us managing this going forward? And I don't want to sound like I'm repeating many of the things, but I would like us to go a bit from the macro level, a bit into a couple of micro points as far as you're concerned, of how are we going to be managing those three important factors going forward?
I think that it's a challenging question, because where we are today, thanks to the comprehensive role of multiple sectors. I think there are three important conditions that are necessary for any country to achieve the level of competitiveness that we have achieved, and it could be in any sector, but in particular for cigar making. One has to do with, of course, the environmental, the agricultural, and the geographical conditions that allow us to have raw material that is of high prime quality. Raw material that we do not need to ship, that we just need to take to our warehouses and start working on it. The second condition is to have the human talent to be able to work that tobacco, because we could have, great tobacco, but we could waste it if we don't work it properly. There are other conditions like the role of the state, the role that the state has played for the last 30 years in facilitating the emergence of agro-export industry like ours. We have to say, Joya de Nicaragua was the first free trade zone to be established outside of the textile sector in the tobacco world in 1995. And to be able to do that, and to be able to work in a special regime like free trade zone, has been a very important factor for competitiveness. Not everybody has to be free trade zone, but free trade zone facilitates a lot of issues with trade, with taxes, with employment. It's a special regime by itself that in no way is easier than the others, but the fact that we're in a special regime facilitates many of the things that we, and for me, I think in comparing to other countries, one of the key things that has played in the Nicaraguan success story has to do with competition, not competitiveness, but competition. When we talk about those hundreds of companies located in Esteli, remember, we are competing not only for tobacco, for land and tobacco, we're competing for labor, high quality labor. We are also competing for the market. We're competing for your interest, for your attention. So every single day we wake up, and I have, Indiana, who's here, or the Ortez family, even though we're great friends, we're competitors. We're competitors with Plasencias, Oliva. We're competitors with AJ Fernandez, with my father. This is a lot of competition happening on. Doesn't matter how well we go about in a personal relationship, but we're still competition. And that competition, and I would have to say, without going into a political realm, that free, open market competition is what forces us to be better, to be accountable to our consumers, to be accountable to our partners, to our distributors, to our importers around the world. When, Raed, you have a problem with any of your cigars that you're exhibiting in your world-class humidor in Dubai, when you have an issue, you know who you're going to call. You're going to call the owner or the top line in that company. You're not going to be waiting for a complaint to deliver that eventually be heard by someone. And that accountability of our names, our reputations, our family, our legacy, whatever you want to call it, forces us to be better every single day. And that's one of the things that has made us better. You go to Esteli every year. You can come to every single Puro Sabor festival, and you will see the differences between one year and another. In every company is striving to be better. to be better with themselves, with their brands, with their blending, with their process, with their aesthetic, with their artwork, with their marketing, with whatever. You know, that competition is the fire that drives us every single day as an industry. And even though, again, that we complement each other very strongly, we buy tobacco from Plasencia, we may buy tobacco from AJ, we may sell tobacco to another company. We see each other, we give a lot of hug, and we enjoy smoking together. We have a very good friendship. That doesn't take that we are competing. And that's just inside Nicaragua. That's why we have become what we are, because and when you take into account our own clients, you know, the Pete Johnsons, the Steve Sakas of the world, that expect from our factories the top level quality that they will be representing, that's a big testament to the trust that they give us, but also force us to be better every single day. Now, moving forward, how do we retain that level of competitiveness? That's a tough question. It's on us. We need to maintain the great relationship, quality, price that we have kept for many decades. And if we start sacrificing quality of our products, then you will be the ultimate judges of that. And it has happened in the past. In the 1990s, with the cigar boom, Nicaragua fell down a very quick slope because factories were shipping immediately from the production table. And we learned, we made a mistake. I remember my father realizing how big of a mistake it was to come into the pressure of the market and just, you know, throw out everything that came our way until nobody wanted anything. And we were stuck with thousands of cigars in stock. We and every other single factory in Esteli and in the world, basically. So we already learned that lesson. We're not gonna be sacrificing quality. Now, there's a lot of pressure, and you guys know it. There's a lot of pressure because the demand has grown. People are smoking more during COVID times. So it's a great challenge that we have, and that's the question that we face every single day in the job. When you go to the production floor and orders are up the roof, and you're saying, if I do 100 more cigars, you know, I'm gonna risk it. Should I do it or should I not? So that's the role of the heads. That's the role of the cigar makers, assuming the responsibility for the product that they are crafting and the name, their legacy, their brand. And I don't think that that's going to change very soon. It doesn't matter how big the boom is going to be this time around, or the bubble, or the growth, or the sustainable, whatever way you want to call it. I know people have come to understand that we are where we are because of the quality of what we do.
Now, obviously, things come and go in phases. There's the ups and downs, and the cigar industry most certainly has lived through those various different stages. Times, they are a-changing. And in particular today, with the impact of technology, with digitalization being not merely a term that has been out there for such a long time, but actually the reality and the new normal, if we will. How big do you see the impact of new applications, new technology and modernization, where the cigar industry has always been about culture, heritage, tradition, and passing on knowledge from one generation to the other?
Well, I think because of the nature of our process, of our product, tradition is key, and that will not be lost. Doesn't matter the medium or the way you transmit that. It could be in systems, in IT, or whatever. The essence of cigar making cannot change until you become a machine-made cigar maker, you know? So it's very hard to jump, especially when we have so many regulatory frameworks that forces us to retain that essence of what we are and who we are and what we do. We cannot change our production process. We cannot change our raw material. We cannot change our leaves from one day or the other, because we are testifying and we are guaranteeing people that our tobaccos are natural, are aged, and that they are, you know, chemical and additives free. That's what differentiates our industry from other tobacco industries that have their own role to play in the world. In our case, it is our responsibility to keep that. And as we move forward with technology now, you know, lab tests on our cigars, when you go into Brazil or when you go to other markets that you need to be submitting lab tests, it says there, oh, this product has a chemical or it doesn't. It has a residue or it doesn't. So technology, in a way, keeps us in line too, because it forces us to continue respecting the craft nature of our product and our process. It's harder for anybody today to play with the process itself than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you could probably go about maybe adding a little bit to the tobacco, or, you know, today that's very, very hard. That's in terms of the process. Now, in terms of the culture, the heritage, we are here, aren't we? We are here, and we are celebrating in a way, in a very interesting way, if we may, but we're not celebrating less. We are learning, we are appreciating, we are learning about facts, but we're also learning about history. We're learning about quality. We're going to be having a great round until I think June or July. Every 15 days, we're going to have a different presentation, and we're doing it with people from all over the world. I don't know how many countries are being represented here today, but in order to get all those countries together, those experiences and those palettes, before it would probably have been harder. Today, technology facilitates that in a way, and it also facilitates for us cigar makers, brand owners, to transmit our messages. You know, social media in many ways has changed the game for our industry. 30 years ago, during the cigar boom, nobody could heard about the consumer unless you were the rep on the streets. You wouldn't know about the experience, the bad or the good experience of a cigar smoker during the boom, unless you were selling that cigar and smoking it with them. Otherwise, they would probably have to send you a fax or a post letter. Today, any of us, we are on social media. We get the complaints. I get Ray's comments on his 40-year-old Joya de Nicaragua that he bought in a collection viajante. I wouldn't get that any other time in history. And to be able to interact with Ray and ask him about his personal experience of a 40 or more year cigar, it's changing. It also helps us to connect back to our history, and getting to know so many of you and in all over the world has been groundbreaking. COVID has come to accelerate a change in our industry that has only been for the better, because we're not going to be replacing cigar lounges. We're not going to be replacing cigar festivals. We're not going to be replacing tastings and pairings. We're not going to be replacing our visits to the market. Once, as Roy was saying, once everybody's vaccinated and we're, past this hump, we'll probably be coming back to you, and we're going to be smoking together, because cigars are no less social today, even though we can use Zoom to socialize, but we continue to need and crave that human interaction. So in a way, technology has come to improve the way we connect with you, with our distributors, with our partners, and most importantly, with cigar lovers around the world. Now, a cigar smoker from the United States can learn about a particular product being released in the Emirates or in Hong Kong, and he can actually buy it and enjoy it. So that connectivity around the world has blurred boundaries, has blurred obstacles, and has made everything better for many of us.
I couldn't agree more with what you said, and it's most definitely a tremendous pleasure and honor to welcome people. Like at the Light 'em Up Lounge, we probably had more than 70 odd countries being represented by people tuning in and watching us. For some of our viewers right now, it's still early morning. We have Ferdinand from Ministry of Cigars, who's just watching right now, past 3 a.m. in the morning in Singapore. And I know that Eric Piras in Hong Kong is doing a watch party, I believe, in the morning. With the rewatch of the show. So we're all truly connected, and this means everything. Speaking of Ferdinand, Juan, he had a question for you over on YouTube with our live stream about the aging of the cigars before you actually ship them. And it goes back to all the aspects that you mentioned with the production and the tradition and the process. So how long, so that people can understand, is usually the time window we're looking into between the rolling and the shipment of the cigars from the factory? And he was asking whether that's pretty much the same for the individual lines.
Ferdinand, my regards to you all the way to Singapore. And you're forcing me to go out off script. So I don't know if Reinhard and Raed will, Jaguar or the PR people from Puro Sabor, because this is a conversation that you're going to be having, I think, with Nestor or with some other great industry representative. But you already know the answer. I think everybody here knows the answer. It's just a rhetorical question that you're posing, but I'm going to give it a go in any case. There are two ways to see this. We talk about the aging of tobacco. We have a great big country. We have a great geographical expanse that allows us to continuously improve our production capabilities of the leaf. And I think we can talk a little bit more about technology later, because there's also a big impact that we have in our environment, but also in our production capabilities in the fields. So we do have good tobacco, so that most companies have enough tobacco aging in their warehouses to guarantee stability, inconsistency in their blends, plus aging, well-aged tobacco to go into the cigars. So I would expect seeing other people's inventory. I don't know the numbers per se, but I can talk about our own experience. But I've seen stocks, huge stocks at Oliva, at AJ, at Plasencia, at Drew Estate. We can talk about at least 2 or 3 years worth of tobacco inventory at these warehouses. Tobacco that is aging, smoothing up, micro-fermenting after fermentation, still micro-fermenting in the warehouse. So we have that aging of the leaf per se. Then we have the aging of the cigars. Once we rolled our cigars, then they go through this aging period. Every company has their own standards, but I know for sure that Nicaraguan cigars are meant to be enjoyed once they reach your hands. When you go to a cigar shop and you buy a Nicaraguan cigar, that cigar should be intended to be smoked. At least Joya de Nicaragua, I can talk about our testimony. And I know a few partners like Drew Estate and others, that their cigars are made to be enjoyed off the box. They're not meant to be closed down and, sat down in your humidor and wait at least a year to open the box. No, cigars should be ready, because we do the work for you. We control the conditions at least. And again, I can talk about Joya de Nicaragua for a 6-month period. Those cigars are aging in our warehouses. And I know that many companies do even more than that. And I'm talking about an average, because we do have cigars that have been aging for much more time. So you have tobacco that has been aged together, rolled together to become well-aged cigars that should be ready to smoke. That's a different argument about the aging of the cigars and how long should you age it. That's a separate conversation. But the cigars coming from Nicaragua should be ready to smoke for the cigar smoker.
There's nothing like a good curveball from a dear brother Ferdinand. But the question I also brought up, the reason I brought up this question, pardon me, is also because the factor time is a critical element in both the economical sense, but also in the socio-cultural sense. And both are the core themes of today's conversation. So my question to you really is, where do you see that essence of time coming into play, and how do you also, with the current dynamic in the market that you pictured before, how do you see time being sort of interwoven into that, and where could the challenges lie moving forward?
So when we talk about time, and I think that some companies have brilliantly used this concept in their own marketing and messaging, the concept of time is the most important variable in cigar making process. Together with tobacco, great tobacco, of course, time plays a fundamental role in every stage of the process. Even the time it takes for a cigar to be rolled is important. We estimate that, at least in our case, from the moment the seed is planted in the field to the moment the cigar reaches a smoker's hands or your hand to be enjoyed, we could have somewhere between 4 or 5 years on a minimum, from the growing of the tobacco, the pre-fermentation, the industrial part, then the cigar rolling, the aging, the commercial part, 4 to 5 years as a minimum. On average, I would say more. We have cigars in our portfolio that have been aged, tobacco has been aged for 10 years, so I can account for 14 or 15 years in the process. So it's an important role. And indeed, when the market faces a disequilibrium like we faced last year, in which demand rose more than what we expected it to rise, because exactly 1 year ago, if we were having this conversation, every single cigar maker in the world was concerned. Nobody can say it now in hindsight, it's easy, but today nobody can say that a year ago their legs were not shaking, because we all were there. Even for distributors, for importers, and of course for cigar makers. For the decisions that we had to take last year regarding the health of our personnel, the production capabilities, were very, very hard decisions. And they were not considering what we see today happening in the marketplace, which is an increase in demand. I'm not sure if it's just a slight increase or it's actually a shock, demand shock, which basically, if you remember your economics 101, it basically moves your economics, your demand curve to the right, which means that we have to reaccommodate our pieces and slowly increase the supply so that we go back again to the equilibrium that I would say what we had by the end of 2019. It was stable. We knew what to expect. We had clarity of what was going to happen in 2020 until we didn't, of course, until COVID came. But it's still early to say. In any case, the responsibility on our part is to make sure that we don't violate the principles, again, that have taken us where we are today, in which time plays a very important role. We cannot rush it. We cannot make the same mistakes. And I think the important thing is that a lot of us are conscious of that, not by experience, but by history. In our factory, I know, for example, that Mario Perez, who is our factory manager now, together with Lionel, he will not allow a cigar to come, even if there's a purchase order for tomorrow, even if we have to ship tomorrow, he will not violate the principle of time. And that's something that has been ingrained in our mentality, in our process, that we need to respect that as much as we can, even if it's tempting, even if we think that, oh, maybe tomorrow this demand will not be there. Oh, maybe if we do not supply these cigars today, someone else will do, because someone else is going to violate that principle in order to make the sale. And that's where the competition and the race downward begins, goes downward. You know, everybody starts pushing and delivering. And then we hit the speed bump in which, oh, the cigars are having equality issues. The cigars were not properly dried. They were too moist, or we had, issues with whatever other variables. So it's hard to respond to that question as a collective, because everybody has their own ways of, doing their thing. But I think that I'm pretty sure that a lot of us, the great majority of us, have this principle tattooed in our forehead when we come into the production floor and say, we will not rush this. We will not be tempted, because that's when things start going wrong.
How do you read this period? The thing that I'm trying to wrap my mind around, Juan, is how do we actually read this period? I love tapping into the economist in you, and I've read a lot about your economic background and your father's economic background, and I absolutely love it, because the most subject I hated when I was in university was economics. I couldn't get it. But today, funnily enough, I have a bit of more insight. How do we read what's been happening? If you look at curves, and if you look at what happened last year, whether we speculated or expected it or did not expect it, there has been some kind of a boom. Whether we're going to call it a boom or play semantics or call it something else, we can call it whatever you would like to call it. But our reaction to what's happening right now, while not being evasive or being misguided by the time rule, would there, based on what we're producing right now, be a risk of overproduction? Would there be a risk of oversaturation because we are of the impression that the bar is all of a sudden up and people might maintain that level of consumption? And by the same token, would you think that Nicaragua today has or may have reached a level of excessive branding component or brands that you need to sort of stabilize this? I just want your take on this and to just give us some.
I would get back to you and ask Reinhard maybe to put out a poll and ask every single retailer or importer here to let us know, because it's interesting. That's the same question we ask ourselves. How long will this last? Is this organic? Is this artificial? Is this sustainable in the future? And that's the decision, very subjectively based, that we are making today in order to plan for our 21-22 production of tobacco in the fields. Remember, now there's an expectation of requiring more tobacco, which means that we will need more land, which means that the price of land will go up, which means that the price of tobacco will go up. And also there's the decision about labor. Right now, it's very hard to find a capable, well-trained bonchero or rolera in Esteli, or I imagine anywhere that we make cigars around the world because, of course, demand. So that also pushes prices up on terms of labor, and it pushes the prices of boxes up because now there's an overproduction capability of printers, of boxes. You know, there are some, I'm not going to say names, but that some suppliers that have up their delivery times from 6 weeks to double that currently. So we already see in the bottlenecks in the industry that even if we had the cigars in stock, we probably won't be able to supply all of that because we're not isolated. We don't work as a, independent. We need to, from shipping containers, by the way, ironically, there was a shortage of shipping containers around the world. That means that if we before had 4 days to book a 20-foot container to ship to Asia or to ship to Switzerland, to ship wherever, now we need at least 15 days in advance to schedule that because there are not enough containers in Nicaragua to ship. Of course, there are many things that arise not only in the cigar itself. So moving forward, how do we interpret this? And this is a good question. And again, I ask anybody who has their own experience to pitch in. If you had asked me this question 1 year ago, my response was that, we're in the middle of a health crisis. Probably people will probably not smoke less, but won't necessarily be smoking more. If you had asked me 6 months later, I would probably say, people are really smoking more. I can see it in the Zoom sessions. I can see it in the social media. But 1 year after the fact, it's very hard to predict, at least from our side based here in Nicaragua. It's this, you guys that have a closer feel to the market, to the consumers, can say, yes, we see people are actually enjoying more, and we see more people enjoying cigar, which is the key. It's not only important that cigar smokers smoke more cigars, it's important that new smokers come into the industry. And if people had more time to, open up their minds to new experiences, to new adventures, maybe we've had more cigar smokers out there. I would ask you back, right? Have you seen more people smoking? And that would be the main driver. If, on the contrary, we see that importers and distributors just reduced their stocks last year because of fear and uncertainty, and then when they realized that people were smoking nonetheless, they bump it up again, and they started anticipating any potential fourth or fifth wave. That's not a sellout. So that is a risk because you might be overstocking yourself, which has had in the past. In 2018, Nicaragua suffered that because of the political crisis. We saw a tremendous growth in cigar exports because people wanted certainty, not because people were smoking more Nicaraguan cigars. So in 2019, that demand shock, which is artificial because of a political crisis, came back, and we suffered in 2019, and we expected it in 2020 to also continue suffering the consequences of that anomaly year. This year, it's hard to say. It's very hard to say, and unfortunately, I don't have it, and I hope nobody has the magic ball to predict how this is going to happen in 3 months. In the middle of the summer, when most of the developed countries should be vaccinated, will people go back to lounges freely and spend more time in events? We won't have Intertabac, for example, this year, that has already been canceled. So it's going to be very hard to see, at least in the European market, how's that going to happen. We're expecting to see how PCA in the United States, the trade show, is going to unfold, and what the presence will be of both retailers and producers and manufacturers to be able to gauge better what they impact. But I can say that the coming spring, now that we're starting spring, coming to summer, will be the determinant. If we see that this is something sustainable, it should show now. It should start showing now. The winter generally, which is the last 3 months, 4 months that we've had, is not a good indication of what will happen in the past, because winters, tend to have, from weather issues to transport, logistical storms everywhere, even demand goes down. That's normal. But moving forward to the spring and to the summer, I would expect things to show the real face.
Look, I don't want to turn it personal, and I do want to talk from my personal experience. Over the past, I would say 2 months, 60% of the people that are walking through my door are new people. And these are people that are moving to New World Cigars. These are people that want to discover Nicaraguan cigars. And these are people that have heard a lot about cigars and want to try and start their own journey, if you may. So I'm very encouraged by that. But while I'm asking you about oversaturation, overproduction, I cannot help it but to take it from the flip side. And I don't mean to be negative, but from my experience, look, I come from Jordan at the end of the day, and one of the biggest challenges for the Jordanian economy ever was brain drain, which is pretty much defined as talent leaving the country. I know in Nicaragua, people potentially would stay more within their roots. But do you say that you just mentioned that the cost and the availability of the talent is very challenging at this point. But would you see any kind of talent drain happening for them moving to other countries or potentially other industries that they may see as being more feasible for them?
I laugh because, and I'm not joking, I had this conversation on Friday at the factory with our team.
Oh, you're grinning. I'm like, shit, I think I'm posing the wrong question.
No. And I'm going to tell you with all transparency, and I'm not going to lie, even though this is going to, and probably my team is not going to be happy that I'm releasing their conversation sequence in meetings. But we had 3 world-class boncheros, 3, that in the past 15 days emigrated to the United States. In the past 15 days, 1 left, and he immediately, once he reached, he sent a message to the other 2, and they just left. And they just left without 15 days notice. They just emigrated. And I wouldn't call it necessarily a brain drain. It's more a talent drain because it's a combination of hands and brain. And right. Ideally, a brain drain would allow you nowadays to do what you do remotely. Unfortunately, in cigar making, that's not possible. And we had this discussion. What would be necessary to retain these people? We've had boncheras that are in Spain, that are in Costa Rica, that are in Mexico, and they are bringing people and they are writing to the people. And this is something that we as an industry collectively face. Now, of course, Nicaragua is an eminently young country population-wise. We are young. So that means that we do have in line coming people, and we are training consistently and permanently people to come into the production. However, unlike Panchita and unlike the legacy workers that we've had working in our industry for 25, 30, 40, 50 years, cigar making for boncheros and rolera is no longer a destination trade. It's more of a stepping stone because now younger generations, connected generations, even in a third world country like Nicaragua, they aspire to more. So a great deal of our young workers, men and women, are actually studying for a professional degree or are actually using cigar making as a stepping stone for their whatever future. They're earning money, earning good money, by the way, because this goes back to the impact. The salary of an average worker in the official Chamber of Tobacco is about 25 to 30% above the minimum average in the country.
Oh, wow.
So the average of the minimum in all trades. So already cigar makers, cigar rollers, boncheras, and everybody is earning more than their average Nicaraguan counterpart by a lot. And this is just only in production. When you talk about the administrative team, the commercial teams, a lot of them are based in Nicaragua. And that's a lot of talent too. But we're having people coming into the industry. So they have 2 ways out. If you're a young person, if you're 25 years old and you're about to finish your degree, you can either decide to go to your profession, be it a lawyer, be it a teacher, or be it an accountant or whatever, or go to a bank, working in a bank or financial sector or whatever, or commerce, or set up your own business. Oh, by the way, on Friday, I received the resignation letter of one of our key staff because he was building his own business. He's making his own hotel and restaurant. That was his goal. He's a young guy, but he just quit because he had enough of the cigar industry, and now he had saved enough to go into make his own business as an entrepreneur, which is fantastic, by the way. I wouldn't oppose that. And I support that, especially for Nicaragua, that we need more enthusiasm and more entrepreneur spirit that we do have a lot. But we have that happening, unfortunately. And if we are able to stop that, it's hard to know. It's hard to know because we would need to raise incomes of our people so much that we would lose the competitive edge that we have versus the Honduras. And we're not talking about government imposed minimum wages like other countries. We're just talking about market driven pressure. Even in a country, by the way, that is 3 years in a row in an economic depression.
Yeah.
So as every other sector in the Nicaraguan economy, except a few commodities, has been going down, cigar making has been going up. So you have tourism that has been basically almost dead since 2018. Construction, you have the agro sector, and you have tourism services that have also gone down. Cigar making has gone up. So unless we balance that out with huge increase in income, it's going to be very hard to stop. Now, the other way out is that we as companies open up the doors and train people to aspire to more. So, for example, one of our objectives as Joya de Nicaragua, beyond making fantastic cigars, is to make sure that every single person that goes through our factory, when they go out, either they retire or they quit or they go to a better future, whatever, they have a superior living standard or standard of living than when they came in. If they retired there or they were, which means that we either make sure that they do that or we open up the doors in creating jobs of higher quality in marketing, in communication, in commercial, in logistics, which are all trades that are very important. So at many of our companies, the requirement is that you will come from below. So if we open up a space for, let's say, a logistics managers, to say one, or a new production supervisor, we don't go out and looking for production supervisors outside. We develop them in-house so that they aspire to a better role in the company, and eventually, hopefully, they will aspire to a managerial position. And we invest a lot and many of our companies invest a lot in postgraduate degrees. We have special programs for training in specific areas to make sure that our people have the tools and the skill sets, not only for themselves, but also for our trade.
As a matter of fact, Juan, even on today's show, even here in our lounge, we have people from all various countries, but most importantly from various ages as well. We have industry icons like the professor Jose Blanco. We have Indiana Ortez representing the young, vibrant energy and the fresh face in the industry. The cigar culture and the cigar industry has always been shaped by key personas, people that make the difference in community, in business, and most definitely in all parts of life in general. What can we do as a cigar world, as a cigar community and cigar industry to help the dialogue between all the various generations? There's demographic shifts going on. So how can we foster that dialogue between all the various moving parts and the people, all the wisdom and the knowledge that we have in there, and also the fresh, young, energetic ideas that are coming right in?
I think that the first thing that we need to do, that you are already doing, is recognizing that. Starting with the role of Panchita at the beginning of the session, for example, and posing the question is an inherent recognition of that importance. However, I don't think that there's anybody in our industry, at least in our side, on the supply side, from manufacturers, brand owners, that denies the importance of heritage and culture, be it directly from our families or from others in shaping and crafting. We always look to our elders. We always look to our more experienced. Even though we think as young people that we can do much better, sometimes we can only do better if we understand what we need. if we understand none of us started rolling cigars by ourselves. Very rarely would you find someone who was not taught or who was not inspired or who just did not transit in this journey through their family experience or their colleague experience. For example, and I can talk about myself again, and not making personal, but I would never be where we are if it wasn't because the lessons that I've learned from my family, of course, my father, who was the one who taught me everything that I know in many ways, not only in cigars, but especially in life, but also with Lionel, with Mario, and Jose knows them very well. I remember we had the honor of having Jose as part of our executive team for a couple of years in the beginning of the 2010s. And the conversations that were being had at that space, and I have to express gratitude also to Jose, because a lot of what I learned in my beginnings came through those enrichment conversations and dialogues, and that slowness of trying to transmit and learning. Yes, we can do this, but we already went through that path. Learn, please understand that what we do today is the result of many, many, many years of trying our best, of doing the best that we can. So I think keeping the dialogue alive is very important, and spaces like this contribute that, because you guys also have an important role to play. From Scott Vines, based in the UK, to Reinhold, that knows everybody in the industry, picking up their brains and picking up their experiences, and knowing that even though this is a cycle and we see things coming back in vogue, that we see, oh, I already saw that from this. I already saw this type of collaboration that failed. I already saw this vintage. I already saw this effort. We are being better every single year, even though we are repeating our history in many ways. And it's all that because of that experience. In our case, for example, and I know Indiana, that I love her father, because her father, Omar, together with Lionel, were actually the two most important men in the tobacco industry during the whole 1980s. Between the two of them, they were almost like capos in a cartel. Omar was the leader and Lionel was the second in command. And they basically managed to sustain the tobacco industry during almost 10 years of civil war, with gunshots, with militias, with invasions, and they did it. And that experience, the whole Ortez family, is a testament to the experience of Omar and his predecessors. And I think that is inherent in what Indiana and her family do, as it is inherent in what all of us do. Of course, you have newcomers in the industry. Some of them are successful. Some of them think that it's easier, just having a great popular brand. But it's not one thing to have a great popular brand today, but keep it going through the decades. Keep it going. Make sure that you grow and you're sustainable. And it's not just you. And that's one of the things that, if I say, you have to recognize, everybody has to recognize that, even though some brands might have master blenders, and I know people love asking, oh, who's the master blender, or have a family name, it's not one person or one individual responsible for that product. It's a collective of people, more than 300 people involved in making each cigar. But the creative process, everything comes from generation to generation. You can talk about the Padrones, for example, a great success testament of the family working together. None of them, not even the patriarch, Orlando Padron, nor Jorge today, say that it was themselves. It was a family effort, even though Mr. Orlando Padron was the one who began. Even the most recent example, Jonathan Drew at Drew Estate. Yes, he was the crazy gringo who decided to come to Nicaragua in 1996 and risk whatever he had and start an operation. But after that, it wasn't just him. It was Rubio. It was Yesenia. It was eventually the whole collective that made Drew Estate what Drew Estate has become. So recognizing this and being humbles ourselves, knowing that whatever great things we do, it's not just about ourselves or our ego or our badges. It's about the collective. And that goes beyond the borders of our own factories or our companies. It goes beyond to their suppliers, for example. The experience that the Plasencia family has in tobacco growing and processing. Every time you meet Nestor Plasencia Sr., it's a overload of information and experience. Every time you go to buy the simplest of the leaves, you learn so much from that visit that you can become, oh my God, I've been doing things so bad of the past. But even him, It's things that he learned more recently in his growth, in his improvement of their own technique. The same happens with the Perez, with David Perez from ASP, and of course with everybody in our industry. So I think that humbling of ourselves and understanding that this is a collective effort, and going back to the status of Nicaragua, none of what Nicaragua has achieved has been the result of one brand, of one company, of one person. Has been the collective effort.
What a fantastic statement. And as a matter of fact, Jose Blanco, he's here with us and he would like to say just a few words. Jose, thanks for tuning in and welcome.
Hey, Juan, how are you?
Bien, ¿cómo está, profe?
Good, good. Listen, first of all, I have to recognize the years that I spent and still the communication, the respect I have for you, your father, your mother, and all the Joya team. Before I ask a question, I'm gonna say this publicly. You know, I've not only worked with Joya, I smoked cigars from Joya before that and after that. I thought Cuatro Cinco was fantastic, but when your father gave me decades to smoke, and I've said this in a lot of shows, I don't care who gets angry there, the best cigar out of Joya de Nicaragua, without a doubt, was decades. I've smoked it a couple of times, fantastic cigar. But that aside, I'll ask you this. How much of an impact, because to be honest, I'm seeing in Nicaragua what we went through 95, 96, 97, every roller, the fights, the cost of tobacco going up. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry thought they knew how to make cigars out of the 30 or 40 factories closed down after the boom. I think it's different now because there's quality with everybody now. But how hard will it be for next year? Because I know you guys have a lot of tobacco and a lot of big companies, but for those small factories and middle-sized companies that have made so many cigars this year, how much of impact of the prices of cigar will impact the business?
Well, it's hard to say, Jose. It's a great to see you, and my love and respect to Emma and to Jasper. Probably he's taller than me by now. Jasper, by the way, was born in Nicaragua, so we're very proud to have a little bit of Nicaragua in Jose's family. It's a tough question again, and it goes back to how to maintain that competitiveness. And yes, the Dominican Republic is a great testament of what happened during the 90s, but it also was, of course, in a very younger age or stage, Nicaragua during the 1990s. To be honest, I don't doubt that there's going to be a very important impact in prices of cigars coming forward in the next. We already see a regular increase in prices for on a normal basis, on a yearly basis, for most companies around the world. But we're definitely going to be seeing it sooner than later. Most companies will try to reduce as much as we can because we cannot change prices from one day to the other. Remember, we have to give at least 6 months notice to our distributors, in some cases 3 months notice. But changing prices is not an easy task, at least at the factory level. Maybe at the distribution levels is easier, but at the factory levels it's not easy. And we're being pressured by all flanks. We're being pressured by logistics. The price of shipping cigars, and every distributor knows this here, has more than doubled from the last year. Not only because we're almost exclusively using UPS cargo, but because the shortage of a container. Just imagine this. Shipping from Nicaragua, a 20-foot container would cost you around $3,000 to Europe. Today, it's quoting around $9,000. The same route, the same container as it would have been a year ago. So that's a big increase. Probably that will stabilize in the future, but we're already observing that shipping cost is being borne by the distributors and the importers. But we also have pressure from tobacco. Now, there is not a shortage of tobacco. There is a limit, but I wouldn't say that there is a shortage. There is tobacco enough to be able to supply this year. If we keep growing, that means that we're going to have to be investing more for the next year's crop. We're going to have to invest more in land, and land will become more expensive because, of course, now tobacco is that the tobacco guys come, they double up the prices of land because they know that it's tobacco. But also the cost of energy has been growing. Fuel in Nicaragua is quite expensive. So operating costs in farms and in pre-industry is very, very expensive. And of course, labor. Although labor represents less than 20% of the value of the cigars, as it goes up more and more in competition, then that percentage keeps growing. So we're going to have pressure from every single part of the chain, from tobacco, pre-industry, of course. We're going to have pressure from labor, and we're going to also have pressure for suppliers, because as I said before, there are huge bottlenecks in supply for packaging material. So if you want to get your product out there, you're going to start paying more for your boxes and for your bands and for your tubes from China or whatever. There's a big pressure. So I don't think it's going to be, I don't think we're going to see the same prices starting 2022 as we're seeing them in 2020. Now, in what proportion, it's going to be very hard to say, to be honest, because to that, you have to add the fiscal pressure that many governments will be having by the end of this year to compensate their expenses because of the pandemic. So they're going to be milking every single tax revenue that they can. And of course, tobacco and liquor and oil will be easy ones. So they're going to start with us. So many of you is going to see an increase in taxes, not because of cigars per se, but because of your own government pressure. So this goes to the textbooks. This is a perfect experiment on the impact of a shock in the system of every single industry, but specifically in a traditional industry like ours. Now, would that mean that we will stop selling cigars at the prices that we're going to be selling them? Would that mean that small companies that have to pay more, 20, 25, 30% more for the same leaf, and they push their prices, if they're doing a great job, if they're doing a good job in their quality, and they can keep it, improve it, then I think consumers will not hesitate and continue trusting those brands. But if they start cutting corners, if they start sacrificing quality, if they start sacrificing aesthetics in the cigar because now they're buying just the cheap tobacco because they want to make sure that they don't lose their margins, then they're going to suffer. So the trick here will be to maintain, even if prices go up, maintain your consistency, maintain your quality. And I know this is something that I won't preach to Jose, because one of the things he always expresses consistency overall. Just to give you an idea, I got last week, I got a package from Drew Newman, from JC Newman, who was cleaning up his grandfather's study, and he found a 1970 or 1969, we're not sure, catalog of Joya de Nicaragua. So he sent it my way, an original one, and it said the prices there, and I can show it to you. A Viajante, which is a 7, the same cigar that Ray was smoking, by the way, it's a 7x58 cigar, or 8x58, I'm sorry, used to cost 85 cents in the 1970s. 85 cents.
Any chance
And
I can
mean,
get those prices?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. So we're gonna see an increase in prices through all this. So just get ready. We're gonna have to rationalize many things. And on the other hand, and to be blunt and to be open, everybody here knows that we've suffered an increase in cost, but at the same time, we've been able to reduce expenses. For example, in traveling, in trade show appearances, we're doing this instead of coming to Nicaragua. So you guys are saving a lot of money in travel. We are saving a lot of money too. So in a way, we're compensated with a more efficient expenses. I'm not saying that's going to be sustainable towards the future, but you see that balancing out in a way of expenses. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know if you can actually, let me see.
It's a bit tough to see. Maybe
sorry. So it says a cigar that would cost you today, let's say €6, would cost you 95 cents in the United States in 1968. So it's impressive how prices have changed.
Juan, great. Give my regards to your father, to Leonel, everybody there, to Mario. Great to see you, and it's a pleasure. Have a good
Likewise,
one.
Jose. It's a pleasure. Good to
Well,
see you healthy and strong, Jose.
I'm a COVID survivor. You know why? Because I
I
smoked
know.
good cigars all my life.
we love you, Jose, and we want nothing but the best to your health, and we're glad you're enjoying those amazing cigars.
Thank you, Raj.
So it's never complete without a question from our dear friend and diplomat at large, Ricardo. Your Excellency, we'd love to hear it.
Oh, well, you flatter me too much, right? But thank you so much for the opportunity to say I have a comment and a question to make to Juan. But first of all, I want to, and it's so good to see so many familiar faces, and those who I haven't had a pleasure, I look forward to meeting more in person. But first of all, I think what Juan was saying in terms of the collective effort, and he brilliantly remarked on all the key points that have made us the king of cigar making this year and perhaps during the whole past decade. And that collective effort, seeing today how the vision of the Nicaraguan Tobacco Chamber to partner with Light 'em Up, to partner and in the midst of having a smart innovation, a response to not being able to bring everyone to Nicaragua, to do it virtually, and choosing such a fantastic partner, and having both of you, Raed and Reinhard, and Reinhold in the back supporting from Cigar Journal, I think that showcases that vision, that competition, because not only a competition in between the different players within the country, but there is a competition with the Dominican Republic and with Cuba and all these other countries. And this decision of what we all enjoying today and we will be enjoying for the rest of the months to come with the Puro Sabor virtual is fantastic. And congratulations for the vision and the decision making. I think that was really, really important. And I love how, Juan touched on all the key points that led us to where we are, and how in many ways cigars sort of have become a symbol. And two key points that he mentions, in terms of the economic element, despite being in the midst of economy that's starting to recover, and whilst many products and many industries are really suffering, like tourism in Nicaragua and across the world, the cigar industry growing is a symptom as well of Nicaragua. Last year was the only country in all of Latin America that had an 8% export growth. While everybody else exports are going down, Nicaragua led that export. And having 6 out of 10 women in the factories only brings higher quality. And it's an example as well. Nicaragua is the 5th most gender equal country in the whole world. And the top 4, they're only the Arctic Circle. So none of them are cigar makers. And I think those how the cigar industry and cigars have become a symbol of these great accomplishments of the people of Nicaragua is without saying. And I have to add one more thing that I know Juan knows it, and I've been telling this for now 5 years since we've been sort of engaging in conversation and welcome him here when he's been to London. I feel that the cigar industry, aside from the economic impact and the social responsibility and the sustainable development that it has brought to our countries, there's something even more profound that sometimes is easier to see when you're from the outside. Like I have been in the past few years, I've been looking at Nicaragua more from the outside than from the inside. And I think Nicaragua and the cigar industry being the spearhead of this has gone through a very profound paradigm shift. I feel that there's a level of pride in Nicaraguans and our cigars and how proud we feel about it, how capable people feel now that they know they can make the best cigars in the world. They can make some things that are better than anybody else. That's something that I go back 20 years ago, and I don't think we had so much clarity into our ability to do that. So that shift, in many ways, we owe the cigar industry for that. So thank you so much for all the efforts. And I have to say that the impact, not only in Nicaragua, but I see here in London, and I see the families that work with Scott at Tour Imports and how they all benefit from this positive time that we're living. Everyone, the retailers, new stores, new people going into the business and opening their own stores. That's wonderful to see. And we hope that we can continue this great risk. And this is where my question comes when I don't think it's a curveball. If anything, it's more of a softball. But I think it's a topic that we haven't so much touched upon in today's conversation is when we talk about the risk or the dangers, right, to this industry. We spoke at length of the internal risk, But from an external risk perspective, what do you feel right now the elements of regulatory frameworks and the lack of education in politicians and governments and entities in coming up with regulations that potentially could be a key factor to our risk? Do you see that as an important factor? And if so, what can not only us as people one way or another support in the industry, but consumers do, if anything, to help support the industry against those external risks? One. And again, pleasure to see you as always, always a pleasure.
Ricardo, saludo. Great to see you, my friend. Thank you for always be present with us and being that outside voice, Nicaraguan voice from the UK. And I have to start by recognizing that something that I touched upon briefly before regarding the role of the institutional framework that has allowed Nicaragua to grow where we are today. And even though Ricardo mentioned, I have to say that not only the free trade zone, but understanding over the past 20 years that the role that our industry plays in the well-being of northern Nicaragua, but also as an export, key product export, has been very clearly understood by the institutions in Nicaragua, and they do a great job in facilitating trade, in facilitating and representing the interests of our industry, which takes me specifically to your question, Ricardo. It is perhaps the biggest external risk that we have outside of another global catastrophe or pandemic or whatever, even though we already knew that, we realized that it wasn't necessarily as bad as we expected. It has to do with the regulatory framework, not only in the United States, in Europe, and in many places in Latin America. This framework that forces our products to be considered in a particular category that imposes a lot of expenses and costs for us to comply with the regulation. Just to give you an idea, a couple of weeks ago, or I think sometime in middle of March, there was this meeting of the World Health Organization on the framework to control the consumption of tobacco. And one of the statements some countries were pushing there was to prohibit local governments, national governments, against their own sovereignty, to prohibit them to meet with tobacco industry representatives, to have no conversation, no communication at all, which is absurd in many ways. First of all, if you want to control something, there's no worse way than closing the doors of communication, you know? And second of all, when you have a country that depends so much, in countries like Nicaragua, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and many other countries that depend so much on our industry, to prohibit that they communicate and freely transmit ideas, concepts, and solutions to the problems, it goes against any common sense. And that's the type of things that some organizations around the world are pushing for. Now, regulation has two sides. I think, of course, you have the negative side, which is basically restriction, inhibiting our capacity to compete freely, to trade freely. When, for example, there are countries, the countries that have experienced the worst effect of the pandemic has been those where the governments don't allow for online trading or online commerce of cigars, like Spain, for example. They have suffered tremendously, even though they could have sold more, because the governments don't allow online trading, even though there are mechanisms to control that very easily nowadays. So you have an impact not only on the local trades, like the retailers, the distributors and importers, but you also have an impact on us because you're imposing a substantial burden to comply with the regulations. And of course, this will be another thing that will increase the cost of doing business moving forward. When we talk about track and trace, when we talk about a lot of those requirements that are slowly coming in line in countries like Europe. Lab testing, for example, is extremely expensive to send samples and do lab testings for every single SKU that you're going to be introducing to a marketplace. And I understand what the reason they are doing it. But it's a big risk, and especially it's big risk to smaller companies that do not have the capacity to respond to those trades. So, and we all come from a small background. We all started somewhere. So if you want to hinder the growth and the development of an industry, kill the small ones. And that's what happens with regulation. And I think that's a big threat, even though it's not necessarily in the short run, because I think the governments should focus on bigger priorities right now. than controlling our products. And I think some of them have come to realize that maybe cigar smoking is not what they should be focusing in this precise moment in time. But there is a good side of regulation that I might say, and I don't want to be controversial in this way, but regulation forces us to be better too. And it has forced many of us to be better, cigar makers, business administrators, because the risk of going out of business because of regulation is so high that you have to do anything that you can, from investing in your systems to investing in proper tobacco to investing in all the process and techniques that allow you to be better to comply with that regulation. So I think that we also have the responsibility of taking advantage of that threat and taking it in our behalf, working collectively, perhaps as an industry. As many countries, we've come together with Dominican Republic, with Honduras, with Mexico, to lobby in favor of premium cigars. And that's something that we're actively doing as a Chamber of Tobacco here in Nicaragua. And we are present. And I have to say, I have to give credit to the Nicaraguan government that even in the good times, the bad times, with pandemic, with no pandemic, with political crisis or no political crisis, they have stood and they have represented the interests, not of us companies, but of the sector and the workers and the growers and the people from the rural areas and the people from the cities that ultimately are the ones who stand to lose the most. We as cigar makers, company owners and principals, we're not gonna starve when factories shut down and go down. We'll probably have some savings, or probably we'll get a job somewhere else if they shut down. But the people who depend, those more than 200,000 people whose livelihoods are impacted by our trade, are the ones who are going to suffer. And for those, all of those that are promoting a substitution, because the World Health Organization, some people are arguing for substitute tobacco for other products. Well, the answer is very simple. If we had better products, we probably had made the change before. But this is what we have, and we are fantastic at it, and we're competitive at it, and we're gonna keep doing the best that we can to satisfy, because people are not gonna stop smoking cigars. They're not gonna stop smoking cigars unless they outright ban them, which I doubt it, because then everybody has to come together in these spaces with consumers around the world and basically shut governments down, because that's ultimately what they will need. So in that way, Ricardo, yes, regulation is a living, breathing threat. It has been for a while, and it will continue to be so for many years to come.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Juan, for eloquently touching on that. And ultimately, if I just might quickly just add, based on some of the comments that I see on the chat, is ultimately it's up to, there's a level of responsibility on all of us as well as consumers, as aficionados, pasionados, as you call them, Reinhard, to help with the education process. These are not cigarettes. These are artisanal product. And I think that's where we can all pitch in and support Juan and the importers and the retailers and our people.
Yes, we all have a responsibility. Everybody in the trade has a big responsibility. In the media, we have a big responsibility. Come together, knock on our politicians' doors, as we do already as companies. But it's not the same when a company comes and tries to argue the point, as many of our colleagues in the United States and in Europe have done through trade organizations like CRA, the European Rights Association, Cigar Rights Association, and all of the trade. But it's not the same until smokers and consumers, the voters, ultimately make the shots. Sorry, Reinhold.
Thank you, Juan and Ricardo. May I just jump in on this question again? I agree that there is a very big responsibility on every single one of us as a cigar smoker. But also, I would like to point out that we as a magazine tried to push the idea years ago already, tried to push the idea of establishing cigar making and the cigar making culture as a World Heritage thing that is worth to be protected. I have, on the political side, I've never seen, other than from Honduras, I've never seen any country like the Dominican Republic or Nicaragua or Cuba or Indonesia jump on that train and push the World Heritage aspect of cigars, which I think would be very beneficial for the industry and for us as consumers. I don't want to take back the responsibility for us consumers. Everybody of us has to be involved and has to try to educate politicians and people. But on the political side, I somehow miss the urge to press the UN to establish cigar making and cigar making history as a cultural heritage. Juan, how do you see that?
It's a good point, Reinhold, and I agree that, of course, there's never enough that can be done. We do have a long way to go. I know that Honduras, especially through Maya Selva and their companies, have pushed a lot to gain the craftsmanship aspect of cigars, some recognition. We on our side, for example, are working to get to Nicaraguan grown tobacco as a denomination of origin, which allow us to protect our products. And that's something that we're working very strongly to obtain, hopefully in the near future, that would allow Nicaraguan grown tobacco to be protected locally and for extension internationally. Those are the efforts. Sometimes the efforts are not as visible as one would see, going to the capitals and that, but there's a constant and permanent efforts happening, conversations with governments, with authorities in the region outside that, hopefully in the future, we're going to obtain that status. But I agree that this cannot be achieved unless we come together collectively as countries, not only as industries inside a country, but together as countries with Procigar, Honduras, Mexico, even the tobacco growing countries like Ecuador, like the rest should come in and pitch in this effort.
And then that question goes to Ricardo. I mean, it's a political question. It's also a diplomatic question, because you guys, as diplomats, you discuss those things and you push those things. How do you see that? Do you see any initiative of any of the cigar, not only Nicaragua, but any of the cigar producing countries?
That's a really interesting point, and you mentioned it quite pointedly. There's an element of the multilateral arena and representation, right, to bigger bodies and the WHO and UN bodies. And one thing we have to keep in mind as well, if you look at which are the countries producing this, right, if you have the likes of Nicaragua and Honduras, in many ways, the voices of our countries within 190 plus other countries within those quorums, sometimes the bigger countries have a huge weight in dictating this agenda. And I can give you a specific example. 10, 15 years ago, we already were advocating for controls in emissions because of the way the impact on the climate. But it wasn't only until the big countries like the United States and other countries got on the train of cutting emissions, and the United Kingdom and others, that it became something that now has traction and is becoming a reality. So I feel that indeed there is a huge, probably the primary responsibility comes into our representations and delegations in this body, but we need to work with getting the mindsets of all the other countries, the importing countries, Germany and Switzerland and Belgium and all the other ones as well, that have their voices have a little bit more sweeter tune to the ears of the UN than sometimes the likes of Nicaragua or Honduras. But absolutely, I think we have to fight in a good way, a good fight in all the different arenas. And I think that's our responsibility as representative of our people to keep on going. And I wouldn't be surprised if sooner than later we can go back to what you said, that what Honduras has been doing, and see how we can do that at multilateral arenas, because we just can't just rest at our ease and see that happening.
I just want to add, and this is a recognition to not only Ricardo, but also the importers and distributors in the UK that have done a fantastic job bridging those bridges and creating those channels of communication. Scott, Alan, and the whole Toro Imports team, and the other importers that have done a great job also. So this is not a one-game show. This is a collective effort, once again, adding together the countries, the media, importers, distributors, and consumers too.
Let me just add one comment. We reported on one female cigar roller in the Netherlands who was able, obviously on her own efforts, to get her skills to be acknowledged as a World Heritage, because she was the only one left in the Netherlands who was able to roll cigars by hand. So there might be different angles, there might be smaller, efforts, but please go ahead and push those things, because once cigars and cigar culture and cigar producing is established as a World Heritage, it's going to be harder to fight cigar smoking.
And on that note, Reinhold, if I may, I'm also sorry to keep on this point, but you allow me then to reach out to you as well and learn a little bit about these stories, because I feel that these are the kind of examples of success in countries of relevance as well that can help us producing countries to be more creative into how we approach it. We've had similar issues with coffee in the past when it was a lot of regulations wanted to say that coffee was bad for health. And these kind of things, and we've learned from those kind of examples. So if you don't mind, we're knocking on your doors and see what inspiration we can get, and hopefully filter and join those efforts, Reinhold. But really good example, that one from the Netherlands. Thank you.
That's amazing, gentlemen. I really have to thank you for your engagement and the thoughts that are coming. This is extremely, extremely inspiring. One question I wanted to pose, and although we've already touched a lot, and obviously it's a never-ending subject as far as government regulation is concerned. But in a recent, well, not very recent, in an interview, Juan, that you had about 2 years ago, you said that the Nicaraguan cigar industry momentum, and I quote, will depend first on our companies making better and better brands, being on the top every year, and respecting the price-quality ratio that has been instrumental in getting us to where we are. We can't lose sight of how we get there. Second, on our country, providing the stability and favorable working conditions for our industry to continue thriving. Finally, and most importantly, it will depend on the international relations framework and our efforts to withstand and resist the intention to regulate our industry in the US, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Fast forward 2 years down the line, are your thoughts the same?
Yes, they're not only the same, but I think that all of them have covered a new form of importance. The first one that I've mentioned already many times in the conversation, of respecting and valuing what has taken us where we are today. The price-value relationship, price-quality relationship is fundamental for us to keeping us on top. And of course, that the regulatory framework that we already touched upon. So I think I couldn't have said it better than what I did 2 years ago, which gives continuity and more context to the challenges that we have in front of us.
I can only continue and to express the gratitude that Rahed had already brought up for a fantastic, inspiring, and most insightful second Puro Sabor virtual of 2021. All the people that joined us for today's session, I would like to thank you all on behalf of the entire team, the people from the Cámara in Nicaragua. Juan, thanks for everything that you shared with us. I would like to let you know that in 2 weeks' time, in exactly 14 days from now, we will have our third episode with Nestor Andres Plasencia about tobacco in the field, the pre-industry, and everything in regards to the growing, the wonderful process of curation and fermentation. So that will be another amazing session, more focused probably on the leaf itself and the terroir and the soil. But such a delightful conversation that we shared with you, Juan. And also I have to thank you for the sort of multi-sensory experience that you have provided us with some of the wonderful background elements of Nicaragua. We had a wonderful video to show, and thus there's always going to be something new with the virtual edition of Puro Sabor 2021. So please stay with us. You can find all the latest information and our newsletter on the official website, that is lightemupworld.com/Puro Sabor 2021, lightemupworld.com/Puro Sabor 2021. So check it out and stay tuned. Before we wrap things off,
can I just say before we go?
Well, of course, Juan, you fire away. I would never cut you out there.
Two quick things. First of all, and Ricardo mentioned this very briefly about the social responsibility. If we're going to talk about the impact of our industry, we cannot forget what goes beyond just the trade itself and the business itself. The impact that every company in our collective efforts have on the health, the education, the environment in northern Nicaragua, it's incredible. From education program like Pronica, that was established by Van Horsen, and Tom Mulder was here already, and follow up with Scott and Tor Imports. This is a program that focuses on scholarship for primary school children of the poorest families in Esteli. We have hundreds of kids that have a scholarship to study their full primary school, which is fantastic. Now you talk about the vulnerable population, the elderly, and of course the environment. The Nicaraguan Chamber of Tobacco, it was the first entity in the country, in the region, to establish an environmental trust fund for the protection and revival of the Esteli River Basin. And this was from the profits of one of the cigar festivals that we had about 5 years ago. All of the profits from the auctions that we got in that festival went into this trust fund to invest in the environmental protection of course, where we grow tobacco, but beyond that. So the effect and the impact on the people and the environment and the community is there. And with that, I want to thank all of you, cigar smokers, cigar aficionados, cigar enthusiasts, cigar apasionados, the media, distributors, importers, brand ambassadors, everybody whose job impacts everything that we do in Nicaragua. To the question of what is the true impact of cigars in Nicaragua, in our communities, you are the main drivers of that. So thank you very much for the trust that you have in our products, in our companies, in our brands. Thank you for believing in the talent of our people. Thank you for believing in Nicaragua. Thank you for trusting our capabilities, our skills in delivering this. We would never be where we are today if it wasn't because of your trust, of your belief, of your risking it. It's saying, I'm going to go against the waves, the tides, and I'm going to represent these Nicaraguan brands because I believe in that. And that is for us one of the most valuable aspects of Puro Sabor, being able to connect with you, be it physically here during the local festivals, but also virtually, to thank you that we are where we are because of you. And we hope that we continue walking together in this journey through the good times, through the bad times, through the challenges, but most importantly, through enjoyment of Nicaraguan cigars, Nicaraguan culture, Nicaraguan heritage, Nicaraguan tradition. So from Nicaragua to all of you, thank you very much for joining us in this virtual Puro Sabor experience that we hope is the last one, because in the next one, we want all of you here in Nicaragua, in Esteli, smoking a cigar together, drinking some toñas and flor de caña, and dancing to the loud Nicaraguan music. So thank you very much, everybody.
Bravo, Juan, what a tremendous statement to finish this session. And with that, we leave all of you to a wonderful afternoon and evening, and with one final look at some of the people who produce this wonderful product that we all share, that we all enjoy, and we all love and appreciate so much. The humble, simple product that brings all of us here together and that we share the passion and the love for. The leaf, the premium cigar. I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks for being here with us. And I wish you a wonderful next session of Puro Sabor 2021. But for now, here is our last glimpse at the Nicaraguan culture of cigars, if you will.
Ya el Señor me tenía destinado a hacer esto. Estar donde estoy. 34 años. Cualquiera dice que es algo facilito. Yo siento todavía el amor por aquella empresa que nunca la pude dejar. Me siento orgulloso. Es un orgullo grande que tengo. El deporte es el vicio más grande que tengo yo. A la edad de 10 años comencé a jugar el deporte yo. A la edad de 18 y 19 años me integré al equipo de softball. Dentro de la empresa sacamos equipo y comencé a dirigir el equipo. A mí me gusta disfrutar del deporte. Que el equipo salga adelante. Por eso yo lucho y peleo, y regaño. Y los muchachos a mí me quedo bastante duro, pero es que a mí me gusta competir. Yo tenía 18 años, ella tenía 28 años y comenzamos a trabajar. Hasta el día de hoy estamos juntos. La historia y la confidencialidad que tuve con mi esposa, yo, de la edad que nosotros lo conocimos, fue grandemente. Y después pasamos a trabajar con Chepita. Ya con Chepita estamos alrededor de 3, 4 años de estar trabajando con ella. Y lo llevamos muy bien, gracias al Señor, como que si tuviera a mi esposa cerca, confiar en el trabajo, entenderlo por el trabajo, que no lo vaya a salir mal en todas las tareas que lo indica la empresa. ¿Cuál es el ingrediente que no debe faltar para que la calidad del puro, el producto que nosotros estamos tirando al mundo, es la comunicación entre la compañera que está en el lado y yo? Tenemos que tener confianza en ella, ser una persona confiable, que si uno va con problemas de su hogar, no tener miedo ni pena contarse. Ya la empresa es nuestro segundo hogar, entonces nosotros lo tomamos como hermanos. Tener una relación buena con todos los compañeros te hace aprender mucho, y el día de hoy yo lo estoy transmitiendo a las nuevas personas que están llegando.
The ingredient to every perfect cigar and every wonderful conversation is the passion and the community. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time here at the Light 'em Up Lounge for the Puro Sabor. Thank you all.
Thank you.